What exactly happened to the Sumners? Carol Margaret Alford came into this world on February 16th, 1944, growing up in North Charleston. Back in her high school days, she fell hard for her very first boyfriend, a guy named James Reginald Sumner. Everybody called him Reggie, a local boy born right there in town on September 18th, 1943. That puppy love fizzled out after a short while, sending them down separate rocky roads where Carol dealt with some truly bad partners. She walked down the aisle 2 times. The first one split up and the second turned into an abusive nightmare she had to escape. Back in February 1987, ex-husband number 2 broke his restraining order, showed up at her door, and pumped 7 bullets into her. Miraculously, she pulled through the trauma while the guy who did it turned the gun on himself when the cops cornered him. Her kids, Rhonda and Frederick, came from those earlier relationships and meant the world to her. Rhonda was only 10 when she had to nurse her mom back to health, proving just how tight their connection really was. Carol refused to stay down, pouring her energy into work and kin for 25 years at places like the Air Force Base and the college. To make ends meet, she pulled extra hours, working nights at Belk and answering phones for a cable provider. Fate stepped in during the year 2000 when a random call to her job put her back on the line with Reggie, her old flame. Since they last spoke, the guy had done a stint in the Navy and spent years working on the tracks for CSX Railroad. That conversation lit a fire under them, bringing back all those emotions they thought were buried decades ago. They tied the knot in 2001 right in her living room, and the kids were thrilled to see their mom finally catch a break. Life was good for the newlyweds, and they quickly became well-liked folks around their South Carolina neighborhood. One of the people living nearby happened to be Tiffany Cole, a Florida girl born on December 3rd, 1981. She came from a big clan and headed north as a kid, dealing with some tough breaks like her dad passing away. The Sumners looked out for her, basically adopting her into their circle like she was actual family. When 2005 rolled around, medical issues and a craving for heat pushed them to make a change. They packed up for Jacksonville, Florida, mainly because Carol was fighting liver cancer caused by a bad transfusion years back. On top of that, both of them were dealing with brittle bones and managing their sugar levels every day. Before leaving, they were nice enough to sell their Chevy Lumina to Tiffany and let her pay them back whenever she could. Rhonda took the move hard since she was staying put in North Charleston while her mom headed south. Even with the miles between them, she made sure to hop on the phone with her mama every single day. By July 10th, 2005, Rhonda started panicking because nobody had picked up the phone for 48 hours. Sick with anxiety, she drove down to Florida, but seeing how dead silent the house was only made her feel worse. Essential stuff like their food, pills, and the cane and wheelchair they needed to get around were still inside. Even poor Mickey the dog was alone, so Rhonda called the cops knowing her parents would never abandon him like that. Detectives jumped on the case fast, documenting what was left behind and noticing the family car was nowhere to be found. A couple days into the search, law enforcement spotted the Sumner vehicle almost 50 miles outside the city limits. Whoever dumped it left the doors unlocked, but the keys were gone from the ignition. Back at the house, cops found paperwork showing a hefty bank balance, which led them to spot some shady cash withdrawals recently. Moving fast, the authorities got the bank on the line and locked everything down to stop the thieves. Things got weird when the station got a ring from a guy swearing he was actually Reggie Sumner. He spun a story about being at a funeral for his sister-in-law and hearing from a buddy that his garage door was up. Then he started complaining that his credit cards weren't working and he couldn't get into his accounts. The detective on the other end didn't buy it for a second, sensing something was totally off with the story. That guy sounded way too young to be a senior citizen, and when asked to put Carol on, a young girl spoke up instead. Skeptical of their claims, the officer asked him to contact a family member who could verify the story. However, the person on the line insisted that their relatives lived in a completely different state. Investigators traced the number from that call to a 23-year-old man named Michael James Jackson. Phone records placed his device in the immediate vicinity of the Sumners' residence on the very day they went missing. Digging deeper, police discovered a series of calls to a rental agency where a neighbor named Tiffany Cole had rented a Mazda. The vehicle had not been returned on time, but it was fortunately equipped with a GPS tracking system. Detectives reached out to Tiffany's family and her brother provided them with her current address. Meanwhile, the tracking data placed that rented Mazda right at the victim's home on the night they vanished. Security footage backed this up, capturing Michael withdrawing cash from ATMs with the Mazda parked in the background. The digital trail eventually led the team to a Best Western hotel in Charleston where she had booked 2 rooms. On July 14th, police apprehended Tiffany, Michael, and 2 18-year-olds named Bruce Nixon and Alan Wade. A search of their rooms revealed damning evidence, including property belonging to the missing couple. Officers found Reggie's bank card tucked right inside Michael's pocket. The trunk of the Mazda contained Reggie's coin collection, personal documents, and a checkbook. They also discovered a laptop and a stash of newly purchased items. Authorities arrested Tiffany a short time later in the vicinity of her home. She was still in possession of the Chevrolet Lumina that she had purchased from the Sumners. It broke the family's heart to learn that Tiffany, someone they loved like a daughter, could betray them in such a horrific way. Police took Bruce and Alan into custody alongside the others, and Bruce was the first to crack under questioning. He laid out the entire scheme and revealed exactly what happened to Carol and Reggie. The plot began back in June of 2005 when Tiffany and Michael visited Alan in Jacksonville. During their trip, Tiffany called the Sumners to ask for a place to crash, and the couple happily agreed. While visiting, the host mentioned the $99,000 they made from selling their South Carolina home, a detail that sparked the deadly plot. Tiffany and Michael recruited Alan and Bruce to help pull off the heist, figuring the frail couple would be easy targets. On the night of July 8th, 2005, the crew geared up with duct tape and plastic bags. They rolled up to the Sumners' house in the rented Mazda, leaving the Lumina behind to avoid raising suspicion. As they approached the residence, Michael and Tiffany waited in the car, parked down the street. The other 2 accomplices walked up to the front door and knocked while the couple was inside frying chicken. Carol answered the door and was greeted by 2 polite young men who asked if they could use the phone. Being kind and trusting, she invited them in, but the situation spiraled out of control immediately. Alan ripped the phone cord out of the wall while Bruce brandished a toy gun to terrify the couple. They shoved Carol and Reggie into the bedroom to bind and gag them, then radioed Michael to come in and search for financial records. While all this was happening, Tiffany sat waiting in the car at the end of the block. Once they had gathered the loot, including jewelry, a safe, and Reggie's credit union card, they prepared to leave. The intruders marched the couple out and forced them into the trunk of their own Lincoln Town car. Reggie was dressed in pajamas with an ankle brace, and Carol was visibly weak from her liver cancer treatments. They loaded the rest of the stolen goods into the rented Mazda, and the 2 vehicles drove off with the boys in the Lincoln. With the Sumners trapped in the trunk, Tiffany and Michael followed behind them in the Mazda. They headed toward a remote patch of woods in southern Georgia that they had selected days earlier for its isolation. The group agreed that if a police officer stopped them, the Mazda would speed off to create a distraction, but the drive went smoothly. When they finally reached this secluded spot, the vehicles went their separate ways. 2 days earlier, using stolen shovels and flashlights provided by Tiffany, they had dug a grave 5 feet deep and covering about 2 square meters. The Lincoln backed up to the hole, and the attackers popped the trunk to drag the terrified couple out. They strangled Reggie and forced him to reveal the PIN for his bank account. Then, bound and helpless, the couple was thrown into the grave alive. They struggled in vain as dirt was shoveled over them. The weight of the soil eventually silenced their muffled cries for help. Carol and Reggie held on to each other as they died, a horrific end for a couple hoping to enjoy their rekindled love. Seemingly satisfied, Michael returned to the car. Thrilled to have obtained the PIN, the group drove off and abandoned the Lincoln in Sanderson, Florida. Before continuing in the rented Mazda, they stopped at an ATM to withdraw money from Reggie's account, then headed to a hotel to celebrate. Over the next few days, the crew drained the bank accounts, hawked Carol's precious jewelry, and blown through thousands of dollars. In a sick victory lap, they rented a stretch limo to snap pictures, flashing stacks of stolen cash and chugging champagne. While that was happening, Tiffany and Alan went back to the Sumners' house armed with bleach and gloves to scrub away the evidence. Their plan wasn't just to clean up, but to loot more valuables from the property, specifically targeting a computer. Come July 16th, detectives used the suspect's confessions to track down the burial site and retrieve the victim's remains. Prosecutors slapped all four with kidnapping, armed robbery, and first-degree murder charges, kicking off the trial in October 2007. The state rolled out hard evidence featuring Dr. Anthony Clark, a pathologist who confirmed the horrifying fact that Carol and Reggie were buried alive. Those gruesome details sent shockwaves through the courtroom, underscoring just how savage and cruel this crime really was. Bruce took the stand in tears to apologize to the grieving families, showing heavy remorse after copping a plea to second-degree murder. He tried to explain away his participation by claiming he was just a scared kid who got caught up in the moment. His mother and sister also begged for leniency, testifying that he was actually a decent person who had made a catastrophic mistake. The courtroom fell silent during a powerful moment when Carol's daughter stood up to address the judge in the gallery. Speaking for the whole family, she announced they had forgiven Bruce, convinced her mother and Reggie wouldn't want him rotting in jail forever. She actually asked the judge to show mercy, displaying a level of compassion that was almost impossible to comprehend given her loss. Bruce Nixon's full confession and his testimony against the rest of the crew basically nailed the coffin shut for the other defendants. That development provided at least a small sense of relief and closure to the Sumners' grieving relatives. Prosecutors built an airtight case against Michael, highlighting that he was the one pulling the strings during both the planning and the execution. Security cameras caught him buying rubber gloves with the others, while his first interview with police spilled some truly chilling details. Michael confessed he knew about the grave beforehand and described holding a flashlight while Bruce and Alan buried the couple alive. Even though he tried to minimize his involvement, the state argued his actions displayed a total and complete lack of regard for human life. Cell tower pings pinned Michael right next to the burial site exactly when the murders were taking place. Records showed he called the victim's bank from that spot, and cameras caught him using Reggie's card right after the crime. The jury looked at that mountain of proof and saw it as undeniable evidence of his guilt. Tiffany Cole's legal team tried to paint her as a naive young girl who got manipulated and led astray by Michael. Her attorneys claimed she had no clue the hole was for killing the Sumners, insisting she thought it was for stashing stolen loot. They brought in a psychiatrist to testify that Tiffany was dealing with serious mental health problems and a history of drug abuse. The prosecution, however, sketched out a totally different scenario, stressing that she played a major pivotal role in the whole plot. Tiffany was the one who drove the crew to the house, bought the duct tape and gloves, and pawned off the stolen jewelry. The most damaging piece of evidence was that Tiffany actually pretended to be Carol during a phone call with the police. She tried to trick the authorities into believing the Sumners were still alive and well to throw them off the trail. Her involvement in the post-crime celebration, caught in photos with stacks of money and champagne, absolutely disgusted the courtroom. The judge highlighted just how involved she was, pointing out that she held the flashlight while the grave was being dug. She guided the killers right to the Sumners' doorstep and actively helped make the robbery and murders happen. Calling her actions cold and calculated, the jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes on October 19th, 2007, before finding her guilty. When it came to sentencing, 9 out of the 12 jurors voted to recommend the death penalty. In March 2008, 25-year-old Tiffany Cole got death by lethal injection, plus life for kidnapping, and 15 years for robbery. Michael, who was also 25, and 20-year-old Alan Wade were both handed death sentences as well. Bruce Nixon, the one who worked with investigators and testified against the rest, took a plea deal for second-degree murder. Although he was looking at life, the judge cut his sentence down to 45 years because of his remorse and cooperation. A string of appeals followed the convictions, but Tiffany's first attempt to overturn the verdict in 2010 was shut down. During another appeal in 2015, she told journalist Diane Sawyer in an interview that she was a changed woman who had found peace. The prosecutor, however, wasn't buying her story for a second. He said that in more than 20 years on the job, he had never seen a crime as evil as the torture and murder of the Sumners. Tiffany's appeal team argued that her original lawyers did a terrible job and failed to represent her effectively during the trial. Her new counsel slammed the original team for being unprepared, claiming one attorney pushed for a plea and wasn't ready to fight when she refused. The other lawyer hopped on the case barely a month before trial and had only just gotten the green light to handle death row defenses. Even with those points raised, the law in Florida says every person involved is just as guilty if they help make the crime happen. It makes no difference if they were not the one who actually took the life. So Tiffany stayed exactly where she was on death row. The massive pile of evidence and her specific role in the plot sealed her fate in the eyes of the justice system. Bruce Nixon spilling his guts and working with the cops became the key factor in locking up the others involved with him. For the Sumner family, his choice to talk offered a little bit of closure while they dealt with such a crushing loss. But the court battles for Tiffany Cole, Michael, and Alan Wade painted a much more complicated picture of what fairness looks like, including reducing factors and the nagging questions about just how much blame they really deserve to carry. In her appeal, the defense claimed her trial lawyer totally dropped the ball on checking her mental state, broken home life, and emotional weak spots. The paperwork stated that the jury never heard a word about her low IQ or the serious trauma she had lived through, leaving out key details about how easily she got scared and how she would do whatever men told her to do. Her attorney at the time decided not to try and throw out the things she said after getting arrested, instead using those words to paint her as a minor player, a good girl who just got mixed up with some bad guys. The state shot those arguments down completely, insisting that her first legal team did their job exactly as they should have. The prosecutor purposely steered clear of her history with street work and pushing drugs, figuring it would hurt her defense more than help. In the end, the Florida Supreme Court stood by the death sentence, seeing no valid reason to toss out the conviction. Back in 2017, a high court ruling said juries had to be 100% in agreement for death penalties, dating back to 2002. That decision opened the door for Tiffany, Michael, and Alan to ask for new sentences, but then a new law flipped it back, making everything unsure again. The team representing Alan Wade put a heavy focus on just how young the guy was. He had turned 18 only 47 days before the murders, and they argued that teenage brains work way differently than adults. His lawyer noted that if he were just a tiny bit younger, execution would be off the table. The judge eventually switched Alan's punishment to life behind bars for good. News came out later that while on death row, Alan married a lady from France named Sigrid and even fathered a kid with her. How exactly that baby happened is still a mystery, since private couple time is strictly banned in death row prisons. Sigrid mentioned she plans to keep the real story a secret until her son is grown up enough to understand. Tiffany is still locked up at Lowell Correctional Institution and is now in her early 40s. Even though she got the death penalty in 2008, she keeps fighting it. The first jury for Michael suggested he die for his crimes by a split vote of 8-4, which would not have passed the test under the temporary rule requiring everyone to agree. But with Florida's updated laws, you do not need a unanimous jury for the death penalty anymore, making his future pretty complicated. For the family of Carol and Reggie, the way things played out in court left them feeling a whole mix of emotions. Although the punishments felt like justice served, they could never wipe away the agony of losing their loved ones. Carol's kids, Rhonda and Frederick, talked about imagining their mom on the phone, only to get hit hard by the silence of her being gone. Rhonda went on record about the family choosing to forgive the killers, saying she felt her mom and Reggie would have done the same. She even became friends with the relatives of Tiffany, Alan, and Bruce, finding a path to healing and letting go. For Rhonda, focusing on the beautiful lives they lived instead of their brutal deaths brought her some peace. The ashes of Carol and Reggie sit together in an urn at Rhonda's place. A marker in a local graveyard honors them with the words, "Together forever." The way they were killed stunned everyone they knew and left a scar on the community that will not fade away. The case blew up nationwide, getting plastered all over the news and even showing up on a 2011 episode of Deadly Women on Discovery. Even with the tragedy, the love Carol and Reggie shared stands as a powerful symbol of their strength and the bond they held on to until the end. If this story grabbed your attention, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We drop fresh true crime videos for you every single night. Catch you later. Keep your eyes open and watch your back. If this investigation hooked you, go ahead and smash that like button and follow the channel. We upload new mysteries nightly. Until we meet again, stay safe and keep your head on a swivel. It was a hot night in July 2005 as Reggie and Carol Sumner got ready to eat supper at their Jacksonville place. The pair was soaking up their quiet retirement days, looking forward to everything the years ahead held for them. That peace shattered the second a knock rapped against their front entry, and Carol, being the sweet soul she was, opened it right up. Things went south fast, plunging the unsuspecting pair into a living hell where their safe haven turned into a house of horrors. By the time the sun came up, they were gone without a trace, leaving only a confusing trail for anyone looking. With the phone line cut, their ride gone, and vital pills sitting on the counter, the family was left asking one terrifying thing.